He bakes. Oh,
You know, so there.
did,
You know.
good morning, Brian. How are you? So can we do a sound check real quick? Can you hear me okay?
I can't.
Thank you. Perfect, and I can hear you too. Thank you.
My computer is having issues, so I'm going to have to restart it and come back, just to let you know.
Thank you, Ryan.
Everything the way that it was.
Good morning, Commissioner Scar. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes, I can.
Wonderful, thank you. We will get started in a couple of minutes.
Morning.
Thank you.
Cool.
Testing, testing.
Hi, Dave, we're here.
Bring down two buildings in downtown for sure. So
I always forget what the new name is.
housing production.
All right, well, it's 9 o'clock, everybody. Let's go ahead and get this rolling because we have a pretty full agenda. And we'll just introduce people as they trickle in. First off, I'm Carrie Fleischer, I'm the chair of the commission. I want to go ahead and we're going to start with introduction. So,
Okay.
Mark.
Mark Kessler, Vice Chair, North County Rep.
Heidi Woolsborough, newest member, I believe, of the commission, on a construction company locally. Marlisa De Jesus, Office of Houseless Service Coordination.
Sarah Absher, Community Development.
Parker Salmons, Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Kristen Kopjuk, member at large, Rockaway Beach based.
Chris Wilkes, Development Committee, contractor here in town. Dave Bennett, South County Rep.
All right, is there, I see Dave online. Do you want to introduce yourself, Dave?
You're muted, Dave.
Still muted. No.
Now?
There we
go.
Okay, Dave Madison, member at large.
Great, thank
Hey,
you.
Cindy. Yep.
It doesn't look like Briar's popped
She's
back on.
coming back.
She's coming back.
Yeah.
Aaron, go ahead. Commissioner Scar.
Good morning, Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner.
We have some people in the audience today, so I'm gonna ask you because I introduce yourself.
Ralph McRae, property owner, Bay City.
Lisa McCray.
Rich Brackey.
Great. And is there anybody online that would like to introduce themselves this morning?
Yeah, I'm Michael. What? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Harry Cooper, EDC Director.
And I'm Michael Weisenflew, and I just joined the Finance Committee, and I'm just here hanging out, listening to you guys today.
Great, thank you. Well, perfect. Well, I'm gonna pass this over to Bart for our mission minute.
Is there anyone who has a mission minute to update us on? Which is anything that's going on of interest or note, housing related or?
Well, Bayside Commons open, or had an open house at least, and is accepting applications. So I know some of us were there, were able to walk through the units, which were beautifully designed and really going to be nice units. And then even towards the end of the open house, a couple came by looking for places to stay and said that word of the new apartments had gone word of mouth. So they came by for an application, and yeah, it's exciting.
I just want to add, one of the really cool things about that project is how hard Darren Murphy fought to get the extra ceiling height. He fought really hard to get 2 more feet, and that is the difference between it feeling like a shoebox and like a real home, in my opinion. So it's really cool to see how much thought and intention went into that.
And I just wanted to say that I saw at the Garibaldi Village Apartments, there was actually quite a few cars in the parking lot in the newest complex. So it looks like they're getting occupancy as well. And that's a market non-supported housing from that was kind of
Naturally occurring.
naturally occurring development.
Naturally occurring.
Karen emailed Parker and I yesterday. I think he's moving forward with the Nahalem Bay House acquisitions. I'm gonna do the environmental impact statement for him for his HUD financing. So that will be coming forward. And then this Saturday is the festival at the high school. So the 406 consulting team and I will be going. Commissioner Scott, I'm going to say the name of the festival wrong, or the event. Do you remember what it is? I just have to be there at 4 o'clock and we're gonna talk about housing.
I'm sorry, festival? I'm not,
There's
I don't
some-
know which one you're talking about. Sorry, Sarah, help me out.
No, I don't remember the name of it and I don't want to. Marlisa's pulling it up.
The Hispanic Heritage.
Oh, thank you. Okay, yes.
And that's at 4 o'clock at the high school, I believe, for anyone that would want to go. So the consulting team and I will be there to do some housing outreach as part of Senate Bill 406. So that is our last stakeholder meeting. I just wanted to be there at 4 o'clock. But if any of you have time on Saturday, I think that'll be a great event. I'm excited. I've never been before.
Completely free. Yeah, the Tillamook Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. I think it's the first event of an annual thing. So I think it's going to be starting this year in the Tuesday.
And then I did notice we have a couple more housing commissioners online. Briar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Briar Smith with Tillamook County Habitat for Humanity. Good morning.
Great. Good morning. Megan?
Good morning, Megan Carpenter, City of Tillamook representative.
Great. And then, do we have anybody in the audience that would like to make public comment this morning?
We got space. If you guys want to come and take a spot. Rich, come hang out with me.
All right, and is there anybody online that would like to make public comment that's not already on the agenda? All right, hearing none, next, we have new member introductions. Is that Parker? It says all, or did we?
No, we are going to dive right into our 2024 Housing Production Solutions framework discussion. Really quick, I just want to call out a few little edits that I found on my own work here. I have not changed the multifamily rental housing fund to the Housing Production Solutions Fund in the first paragraph on this is the framework document in front of you. And the only other error I would like to report before we dive into this is on page 1, 2, 3, 4 at the bottom, there is a subtitle Housing Production Fund Efficiency. And that should be a 4,000, not 400 next to function.
Oh.
And with that, I will bring up so that everybody online can see and we talk.
We didn't get there. We're good.
Thank you.
4,000 here, is that what you're saying? Yeah. Gotcha. Good care.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, we had a minor delay. Now we're all on the same page.
All right, and I have now shared this so that as we speak about these items, it will be up online for folks at home. So, I am, yeah. It should be coming up. There we go. All right, so to begin this discussion, I just sort of want to remind everybody where we ended this discussion during our last round of funding. As we went through our evaluations in both the Finance Committee and with the Greater Overall Housing Commission, I think everybody identified at least one element that they thought could be adjusted or changed for this framework to be more in line with our goals. To that end, the Finance Committee and I, and big thanks for Dave for spending like a whole day with me working through some of the more fine details of this. This is the new framework for our housing fund. And to begin, I'll just sort of call out some of the major differences, but the easiest way to illustrate that, I can zoom in. Hold on.
Thank you. I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
Parker, folks online need some, they may not be able
Yeah.
to see it real good.
I will keep it as big as I can, folks online. Raise your hand or something if you're having trouble seeing it. The easiest way to understand the differences we've made is to find the qualitative scorecard here. And this one is the one that will have several categories on top: old name, old weight, new weight. And hopefully I can bring this up for folks at home too. This might actually be easier. So if you take a look at that document, you will see the changes that have been made to the weighting and the scoring. And here it comes up online for everybody.
Wait, which one is the old one, which is the new one?
The one that says changes made on the top, up here, it'll say 2024 Housing Production Solutions Fund, changes made.
Oh.
That's where we'll start, but this is the companion document to the larger stapled together Housing Production Solutions Fund framework. And we'll start with this quantitative scorecard because it does really show the biggest changes to the scoring that we have made for this. And I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to rely on Dave to chime in if there's more details needed. So to begin with, one of the things we changed in our weight was the external affordability. Previously, this was a 3-point category and was basically divided down into getting a few points for 5, 10, 15 years. We've expanded that to years of commitment beyond 10 years. And that's because most projects operating in these venues have some sort of minimum 10-year requirement. And so to really emphasize that we would like you to be more committed beyond the minimum of the money that you're probably getting elsewhere, we want to reward people and incentivize people to make those commitments. This also is a category that should help affordable, big A affordable housing more than middle income housing. Middle income housing struggles to make those longer affordability commitments because it makes it harder to get their project off the ground from the get-go because they rely on bank financing who wants to see an eventual return. And those longer commitment terms reduce the price, the value of the project before you build it. So in this way, we have captured a little bit more of incentive for the external affordability term and incentivized the more affordable housing in this category. And that's important as I go through this because you'll see we have reduced the weight on affordability elsewhere.
Parker, real quick, just so everybody knows, within the framework itself, you can kind of see where external affordability is listed here and kind of see how that function works. And that's on page 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yes, that is where you can see the description and the function. And yes.
So Parker, we have titled this external affordability commitment term, and we referenced that first paragraph as you and I discussed a third-party commitment. I'm not sure that that's relevant anymore. And what we're really talking about here is a term. So perhaps it's not an external, maybe not necessary, that word. And what we're really looking for here is the affordability commitment term.
Yeah, I'm happy to change this to be a very simple description of affordability term. That whole description to basically just say, we'll stop calling it external. We'll just call it affordability commitment term. And it will very clearly just say, this is, what I just said to incentivize people to go above and beyond the 10-year average of affordability. More points will be awarded at the per 5-year basis that we described below. And that should be, yes, 1 point. Okay. Any questions about external affordability or the now affordability term?
I just want to note that some states and other jurisdictions are requiring infinite affordability, like unlimited affordability for federal funded programs that their state is granting.
Yeah, Kristen has shared this article about Maine, I believe it was, where they have Vermont, where they have now changed the rules on affordable housing, basically saying if you're taking HUD money or any state public funds, that the affordability term is forever. Commissioner Scar?
Thank you. So is that scaled beyond the 10 years or is it just yes or no?
It is 1 point for each year of affordability beyond 10 years for a maximum of 20 points.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions about the affordability term? Moving on to probability of success. We have renamed this section to stage of development for clarity. And one of the reasons is because we feel that is probably the highest indicator of the probability of a success of a project at the time of application, is how far along in the process they are. And you can see in the document that the stage of development is defined, pretty simple: initiation, pre-development, pre-construction, procurement, and construction. Those are all pretty self-explanatory terms, but if anyone has any questions, I definitely want to clarify them. We felt this was a really important one if we want to focus on attainable solutions, which is right in our mission statement. This is a good indicator of how attainable a project is how far along they have gone, what sort of work they've already put into it. And it generally will give a good indication of how far along they are in the permitting, the land use, and everything will be wrapped up in this section. It gives us a lot of information, which is one of the reasons why we gave it the maximum value we will for any section, which is 50 points. And it is 10 points for each of those along the ways. I see a typo. That should be 20 points for pre-development, not 10.
Where does it say pre-development?
Yeah, stage of development.
Yeah. So probability of success, stage of development, you can see we've really expanded the weight on this from 10 points or 7% of the overall points available to 50 points. Is there any questions about that or comments, concerns?
All right, that's done.
Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. So can you talk a little bit about why that was such a huge change? I mean, I think I know, but I don't know if I'm right or if everybody is sort of clear why we are shifting. We had originally seen ourselves as somewhat of a catalyst or incentive fund for people that had good ideas and we wanted to help them get started. But we're really pulling back from that based on the scoring. So I'd love to have a little conversation about the thought process of those who made the adjustment.
Sure. I think one of the thought process was trying to have a little bit more tangible projects coming in. And while there is definitely a path forward for projects to get very high scores, even being in the initiation phase here. And these are by no means final weights on values. One of the things we tried to do was get to a more flat 150 easy to divide number. And that is why the total is 150 points there and 50 points down here to get us to a more dividable number. Again, these are not final weights and we definitely do want to hear feedback. So right now, that is where we landed with probability of success as being a good indicator of how far along a project is and kind of work they have. And yeah.
Is that also kind of like history has shown that when projects that are coming through that are in more of those pre-construction or procurement or somewhere in that process that they have a little bit higher success rate? Is that a story that?
Yeah, this is the OHCS has really put a bigger emphasis on hammer ready.
Yeah.
And but I do really appreciate the commissioner's point here because we are trying to create a venue for people to try innovative and difficult to do and lower probability of success projects. And so trying to find the right balance there is, I believe, the question before you all right now.
Parker, I think that, given the necessity for housing, this housing crisis we're in, that getting housing produced sooner than later is really important to us. And that's one reason why I think we've got more points on these projects that are further along in development. There's also a question about how much of the pre-development initiation type funding we want to do. We'd love to see some developers have some skin in the game. I think that's important too. And so in terms of conventional development, a developer will have some of that done when they come for funding. They've already got it figured out, for example, whether or not this project is feasible. They've got some work done with regard to zoning and et cetera. So there's some question, at least in my mind, as to how much of that initiation and pre-development funding we want to do.
Yes, that was definitely a big part of our discussion. The other thing that we really focused on in this, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was it? I'm sorry, continue, Dave.
Am I right that on the stage of development page, everything except construction is considered pre-development?
Correct.
And I remind everybody that there's no clawback for pre-development. Like you cannot get the money back if the project doesn't go forward, which is a pretty big risk with this funds. So it's another reason we don't want to like just give it all away. I thought we were gonna say somewhere that you could only get a pre-development grant once.
That is called out in, I believe, award types and limitations on page 1. Thank you for giving me this chance to
Great.
reflect my thoughts. A big part of our conversation about the stage of development did center around conversations about pre-development. And one thing that we even considered is, should pre-development funding and construction funding be separate? And the arguments for that is, one, pre-development doesn't do well on an annual timeline where we open up our fund once a year. Pre-development costs can be incurred any time of the year, and to have people wait an entire year for their chance to try something new or be innovative, to the commissioner's point, is really hampered by the timeline of it. I think that if we wanted to be more intentional about supporting those types of projects, we would have our pre-development funding available all the time, that we would basically would want to like set aside funding for that and let people come as those projects percolate and become reality. But having people wait a whole year is only so helpful. So that was all part of the conversation as we went and dove into stage of development. Commissioner?
And then I think another part of it wasn't part of the discussion, but something you and I have talked about, Parker, is just we've had some of our pre-development funds returned to us already. Where
Yes.
folks were not far enough along. And so really, once they got far enough along, thankfully, we didn't have to worry about clawback because they said, I don't want to take the contract. I realize I can't do this. So I think, there's that piece as well that we're surfacing, is just that the historical success of our pre-development funding is low. Is that fair to say?
I would say that's very fair to say, and I think you've captured our intent perfectly. Marlisa?
Yeah. So I do agree that it's important that we're supporting units that will actually make it to that end goal and add units to the county. But I do think it's important to be supporting both ends, because we'll never get more units unless we're really fostering that creative solutions and out of the box thinking. So I'm trying to decide if I'm concerned about the balance, because I would hate for unintentionally this balance to really only make it so that we end up unintentionally only funding that end construction piece. I don't want us to end up at the end of this process and saying, oh, we unintentionally made it so that it's really hard for people at that like beginning stage to even be competitive quantitatively.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head on a certain part of this. It's very difficult, and that is comparing development projects and pre-development projects is apples and oranges. And one of the things we're trying to do with this framework right now is really thread the needle and find a way to evaluate them all in the same venue. And so that is something that, as we finalize this weighting, I hope you guys consider, is just that pre-development and development are just a little bit harder to gauge on one score sheet.
And I think that what you said earlier about having it be two separate pockets of money, where we've decided we're going to commit X amount to pre-development and have it be a revolving, like year-round available fund, might be a way to do that. Because when you think about like personal motivation, right? When somebody is at a spot where they're wanting to dream and be able to do a project or be able to do that, that's on their time. That's not on when my deadline is.
Right.
Because that has to be with like what their work schedule looks like if there's somebody that doesn't do this every day. And that's kind of the idea behind this, is to be able to pull some of those people that have a skill set, but also have, maybe a diverse background and some of this stuff. So that might be an answer.
Yeah, you also want to catch people when when they're on fire for,
Like,
right?
want to give them
Uh,
some motivation to keep going forward.
Yeah, and something that occurred to me while you were saying that is that it could probably be pretty demotivating if you were in here dreaming for your amazing new innovation and you're up
And the
against
application
people.
just closed.
Or you're in here presenting next to people who are like, I am ready to build with my
Yeah.
project and all I need is this financing. Yeah,
So because you have the one-time pre-development grant eligibility clause in there, do you think you could maybe balance out those points? Because that in and of itself is going to take care of,
That's true.
like Tyler Brogdon's project is a great example. He wouldn't be where he is if we wouldn't have given him that money to do the geotechnical evaluation and that pre-development work. I think he's a great example of then coming back and saying, I'm ready to move on to the next phase, and was awarded more money
he was awarded more pre-development.
or pre-development. But he was able to demonstrate that he is continuing to move forward. And I guess that's my point is if you have that one-time clause, I think it provides a nice balance for the people that are creative and wanting to take that risk. But you also then can balance out those shovel-ready projects. Because I agree, if this money is focused more on shovel-ready projects, we all know how complicated it can be. We gotta have a place for people to come and get some support.
Yeah.
So is that, so we're thinking of some X dollar amount, but since we never know exactly how much we'll have annually, and annual doesn't matter anymore for pre-development then, right? So maybe $20,000, 50 would be segregated.
So the other thing I was thinking, just thinking this through in terms of, how often funding could be available, because part of it, remember, this is all tethered to the short-term rental operator license fee. And the lion's share of that money comes in April, May, June. And then the rest of it is, probably, I would say arguably 2/3 come in during that timeframe. If money is returned or that grant doesn't come to fruition, could we potentially, maybe this is a conversation with the commissioners as well, take that money and open a round specifically because that money has been returned, instead of letting it sit there and roll around all year when we have something we know that's a no-go. Maybe it is only 30, 40, 60,000, but that's SDC fees.
Totally. And the question is, would we want to separate out like the first initial pot that we set aside for development and then have our second be for pre-development as soon as we know what remaining funds are?
You could. The only thing I'm thinking of is like, we know, especially now because there's caps on short-term rentals in all of our sub areas. I mean, we have a healthy program, but we have the caps. And, I'll be honest, I am going through a process right now where we are seeing the occupancies being adjusted to address overcrowding concerns, which was part of a community livability issue. So I think after this year, we will level out to see what those funds are going to be in a predictable way. So I don't know if I would separate the pots of money in as much as maybe when you know that a project is not going to take the award, that then you could potentially open it up specifically for pre-development.
Okay.
But I think part of the challenge too is you never know what you're gonna get. Right, because you guys are seeing such a diverse variety of requests and asks, which I think also makes this process very special. So I don't know if you want to separate that and lose that piece either.
Well, and I think that maybe some of that then comes to having it be that the weighting of that section is enough to where somebody can come in and be in pre-development and be so stellar in some of the other areas that they've got their stuff together so much that doesn't make as much of an issue, if that makes sense. So, and that's helpful, right? We want people that are, if they're in pre-development, that they've got their stuff together and that their ducks are in a row to be able to like say, hey, I've got all of this stuff done, because that actually is going to help in terms of motivation and getting people across the finish line.
And cuts down on tire kickers.
Right.
And I just wanted to comment on when we originally came up with this weighting scale. One thing we did do is did a test run Because the original concern was, well, we don't want a small project of the 3 or 4 units not score, would end up historically low on this scale versus a much larger, 150 unit scale. So I know that would be something, I just wanted to make sure that there was some sort of testing or thought in the scoring process.
There
With the
absolutely
new-
was.
Okay.
Dave will tell you that at every single stage of our examination of this, I kept saying, what happens to the fourplex on a single family home lot?
Okay.
Because that needs to be able to score high enough to be supported, because that is some of the highest and best use. So every single step, every time we did anything, I tried to compare it against that fourplex on a single family home lot.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions about the stage of development or the weighting? And we'll have a final weighting conversation, so don't feel like as we finalize these, they're set in stone or anything. But for now, is there any more conversation about the probability of success / new name stage of development? And I'm going to move on to this. This is a little bit more complicated of a item to understand. This took us a little bit of time to work through, but the goal of the Housing Production Solutions Fund efficiency measurement here is to both capture the previously called investment and development efficiency into one category that's a little bit more relevant to our goals. So if you find the Housing Production Fund efficiency section on the framework, once again, just to remind you that it's supposed to say $4,000 and not 400. But this is the way that we found to try to measure how far our dollars go in a project when we commit to it. And the way that we decided to evaluate this is to start with 0 being if you're asking for the maximum $20,000 per unit, you get 0 points. And as you drop down every $4,000, you get more points. And one of the reasons this is a good metric is because it really does represent those larger affordable scale projects. Those are always going to score higher on this category because they generally have more units and they ask for less because they have other funding sources. To remind you, last cycle, the largest, by a large margin, almost twice as large as any other project, was the Home First affordable housing. And that was what I was using as kind of a metric here, is that but one would be so much more efficient with our money than any other project that asked for it, that this is a chance for it to reflect that. This is also a chance to make it so that as you do more and more units, the more you're putting out there, the bigger the return in our minds. And so the more point weight on this category. Thoughts, concerns, or questions? This is the place where we've dropped a lot of weight from the last one. The previous affordability calculation so heavily favored for big A affordable and low income that it would be difficult for any other income level to score in that category even close. And because it was 63% of the overall scorecard, that's a pretty big chunk to, yeah.
But is that the one that we're talking about or the efficiency one?
We're talking
The 30.
Yeah, we're talking about investment efficiency. Oh, pardon me, but the affordability calculation we'll get to, just,
Okay.
This is one of the ways where, because we're dropping some of that weight from affordability, I want you to know that that has been recaptured in this efficiency calculation as well. So both in the years of commitment and the efficiency, a lot of the weight that came from affordability has moved to those categories, but those categories have been changed to that reflect affordable getting a better score, essentially. That they're geared towards that.
On the $20,000 maximum per unit, is that capped at a certain amount of units?
That is not capped at a certain amount of units, no. But we do have our limitations in our budget, and this time we have the $400,000. So that means that the more you ask over that 20,000, the more units you're building than you could ask for from our fund, the higher that score should go.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
So that I am understanding it correctly.
Yes.
This is kind of, promoting projects that already have other funding, so they're not needing as much. And then the projects that don't have any other funding options are gonna require more.
Yes, yes and no. This is a section where the fourplex will get hurt because they're probably going to ask for the maximum $80,000 for their 4 units. And though it does say, you know, if you can be more efficient, you need a little less, so you can get help here. This is much more geared towards the larger footprint buildings getting a higher score here because they will most likely be building more units than they could ask for the maximum amount that we have to offer. So while we have this $20,000 per unit limit, we also have this $400,000 limit. And anything that builds 60 units could never get $20,000 per unit, and that should be incentivizing the larger, more efficient, and more affordable buildings. Took us a while to get through this one. I'm gonna give everybody a few minutes to digest that one, because I know it's a little complicated, and if anybody has any comments or questions, let just shout them out. Hearing none.
How did you come up with these
Yeah.
numbers? Were these numbers already created from the last?
So on the quantitative scorecard, you can see the old weight and numbers on the second to the right column, and then the new weight. And so you can see
On the efficiency, like the.
on the scorecard. Oh, you mean the?
Yeah.
I think the
these
breakout
from the
framework, I
last
think they were
previous?
originally, I think other than maybe giving them more points, a different point, but I think the bracketing is essentially our history was, well, we were gonna max it out at 20, but hey, if somebody's only gonna ask for half that, we want to incentivize that because our money that we're contributing to that project will go farther. And that will give us more money to give to another project instead of having somebody ask for the entire pot of money.
Yeah.
This category also kind of gobbled up development efficiency. And development efficiency was if you can build 10 units on the lot that you're looking at and you're only building 8, we were penalizing people for that, essentially. That we wanted people to max out the total number that you could potentially put anywhere. And there's a few reasons why that might not always be the best look. That's a livability question. Because if we're always maxing out, then there's less room for open spaces, parks, family areas, etc. It also was a pretty big point amount for a pretty small category, but also has a lot of caveats. Thinking about those projects in Manzanita that were required to buy all those big chunks of land to be able to build more units. We have a lot of situations like that where people are increasing the price of the project to get to a higher development efficiency might not always be the right way to incentivize a project. It's almost a wash in terms of breaking down or building a barrier. Any questions about investment efficiency and development efficiency becoming housing production solutions fund efficiency? Commissioner?
Yeah, Parker, so did you guys find another place or space where that might kind of be positively impacted? I mean, in many of these, you're thinking through lots of things we thought of in the past. But with this one, is there a way that we are still encouraging people to make the most of the property, even if that includes green spaces and playgrounds and stuff? But how are we incentivizing that, or do we just feel like that's naturally happening because it makes the most sense to the developer? Help me with that a little bit.
Yeah, you just hit it right on the head there at the end. Developers are always going to try and maximize return on these projects, and they're always going to develop to the greatest efficiency to get the greatest return. And to measure that in an affordability sense is not super helpful for our evaluation purposes, would be the argument that I would make. Dave, you want to put any thoughts to that?
No, I think that's right. And I think, in addition, our thinking was that if a developer decided they wanted some green space and a second developer had no green space, that would be a problem for the developer that had a better plan, more livable plan, and so on. So that's one of the reasons I think that we took that out.
Yeah,
Right, especially with density infill urbanization, like Lisa Greiner's project is a good example of something that did not have that green space element, but was still critically needed and really utilized space efficiently that was available downtown.
and also a good point, I hadn't considered it, but to that point, Lisa Grinders is a great example because technically there could be more units up there, but it would make it more cost prohibitive to do any construction to move the internal walls on a historic building on the second story.
Right.
Well, and I think that some of that livability stuff shows up in the qualitative scorecard as opposed to quantitative.
Yeah.
Plus, we're not getting applications to build monster houses, like 4 houses on a giant piece of property. That's not the kind of application that would come to us for this.
I'd agree. Any other questions about investment efficiency? And Commissioner, did that satisfy your question? All right, onward to affordability. Here you can see this is the largest change in the weighting. And I think we've described somewhat how we've recaptured some of those affordable elements. The affordability calculation basically comes down to AMI and what percent of your units are in the lower or higher AMI brackets. And this was a challenge because we do have projects that apply with affordability mixes. Sometimes that they are some in the 80s, some in the 60. Tyler Brogdon's project had very low income all the way up to 120%. And so we really tried to make sure that we found a way to reflect those affordable elements to encourage you to be in the lower range while still meeting all the other requirements and categories of evaluation. So, yes. The way this calculation would run out, Dave helped me here was you'd get a perfect score if all of your units were 60% and below, and you would get a 0 if all of your units were 100 in the middle income higher range. And then the mix of everything between you would be proportionally represented in the total point categories that you could get in each AMI range. Gonna need to write out how this scores a little bit better and more clearly. I will. But for now, I just want to make sure that people are comfortable with the overall approach here and the weight on this category. And if we are naming it the correct name as affordability, or if there isn't a more appropriate category name that might be more descriptive.
I mean, is it, instead of affordability, is it the relationship to the AMI?
It really is.
So,
It could just be AMI.
yeah.
So when you say affordability, it always brings me back to that conversation we had here a few months ago where we talked about what affordability really means.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so to me, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, AMI or AMI ratio, I don't know what the right thing would be, but calling it what it is.
So long as this is a very confusing topic for everyone.
Yeah.
This has been popping up. So this document is for us, not to have
Eventually,
the
this
public understand it. Then AMI has to be really clearly understood.
Yeah.
Of course, affordability should be, but it's not, because we all, what can I afford? What does affordability mean? But I guess if it's accurate, then AMI at least has percentages.
Right, it takes
Yeah.
the gray area out of it. Is this something that is eventually going to be out to the public to be able to see what our scoring situation is?
Yeah, we have to be completely transparent on this. All the scores, all the scorecards, the framework, everything will be public. And the goal is to bring it public on Monday. So this is our chance to make revisions and make sure that everything is clear and we are comfortable putting it out there.
So in my opinion, affordability leaves gray area, calling it AMI or something along
Or
those
income
lines.
range.
Yeah, or something that gives it a really like cut and dry.
I'd said AMI mix. I think that just explains what it is. That's what it is.
And then just put a
Less
definition
gray
like
area.
MAN.
Oh, what AMI is.
AMI, and then I'll put the AMI tables right below
Because
this.
there's gonna
Yeah.
be the people that don't read the descriptions of what affordability really means.
So I think to clarify, what I'll do is I'll put the AMI table in here. I'll also put a link to definitions pages about AMI and to the HUD page explaining AMI and just basically have a little link throughs right there.
Yeah.
Oh, like.
Parker, from a policy point of view, this is really one of our biggest changes. So under the old framework, we're putting much more weight on the very low income housing.
Correct.
And now we're putting much less weight on that, meaning that workforce housing, for example, gets a bigger point total.
I would say that in this category, yes, but I would just want to remind people that a lot of those more affordable projects will score higher in the other categories by the way we have set them up. But yes, this does give workforce, middle income, less weight on this category, which should reflect better for their projects of the total score.
So that's kind of a major shift in our policies here that we all need to be comfortable with.
I guess my argument is that was kind of our original goal was their housing commission and her focus should be on workforce. So I really appreciate the, I guess, allowing more projects and a higher income to rate at a higher score. And I like it.
What I think we're finding, at least I'm seeing, is that for the very low income projects, there's a lot of funding available, a lot of state funding available, in some cases, 100% funding available for those, particularly taking into consideration low income housing tax credits. And so I kind of like the idea of leaning more towards workforce housing where there's a lot less funding available, particularly conventional financing.
I would just like to say that just going back to our conversation about the vocabulary, and Commissioner Scar, I do see your hand up. This is we have, yes, taken less of incentive from the very low income, but we have placed that on both the big A affordable through workforce middle income. So that emphasis has been not completely picked up and gone all the way to middle income or workforce. We've expanded that range to be more in that 80 to 60 to 120% and removed the emphasis on the below 60 is how this has been worked.
Well, one thing that I just want to be aware of or like say is that making sure that we're like staying within fair housing, that making sure that there's not anything that's going to like dampen and go against like any kind of fair housing things, which I don't know that this applies here, but.
Fair housing always applies to everything.
Right.
And I'm happy, I'll run our framework by Savannah Meekins, our fair housing representative. But in my understanding and training through it, I don't think we are.
Perfect. That was the only, like, anytime we're talking about like moving things from one level of housing to another housing, like fair housing is what kind of pops into my brain.
And one of the only things that fair housing really does let you discriminate against is income level.
Okay.
Commissioner Scar?
Thank you. Yeah, you all know that I am very strongly in support of making sure that we do not lose the voice of those who tend to be voiceless, which are those who need affordable housing. So it's always important to me that we keep that at the top of our mind, that when we did our housing needs analysis, the greatest gap that we experience in Tillamook County is in affordable housing. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. And I know that on the docket is for us to redo our housing needs analysis to see if we have made progress and adequate progress to shift that balance. So I really don't want us to lose that side of that. Okay, when I'm comfortable with where we're going in this because of how affordable housing will still rise probably to the top most of the time because they're going to give you 30 years of affordability because they have to for the other funding they have. And so I think that the way it's been redesigned continues to give them the opportunity to be in this playing field in a very strong way. And I think that is important. And while there is other funding available for affordable housing out there, one of the things that makes affordable housing eligible and score better on those requests is if there's local funding in the mix. So again, I don't want to lose sight of that either. So I guess I'm putting it out there for the record and for the reminder that our housing needs analysis 5 years ago did indicate the greatest need was in 60% and below. So if I don't want us to lose that. If we do have middle housing who's willing to give us 30 years of affordability, that's great, and that'll move them up, and it's an incentive for them to do that. I think this will be a year to look at that and work through that. And we will have an updated housing needs analysis for next year, and we can see, have we made the progress we need to, or are we losing the voice of the voiceless because they're not with us at the table? Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I think I'm going to open this up for more of a conversation about the overall weighting. And if anybody thinks that anything needs to be adjusted, we can expand our total points. We can contract our total points. We can shift around the weighting percentages a little bit. But this is your opportunity to make your suggestions for edits for this, the scorecard element of this. And to the commissioner's points, if anybody sees an opportunity to really fairly and intentionally find a way to incentivize the lower income onto this, I think that we've done a pretty decent job of getting as much of it encapsulated into those other elements as we've decreased that affordability category. But I do want everybody to be mindful of that and think about it and make sure that we are hitting the right target income range here.
I think in general, in our history of granting projects, I think we've seen a mix. I think we've given monies to both the lower income affordable projects as well as the, what we call middle income housing. So I mean, I think as long as we're not losing sight of that continuum.
Yeah.
I think.
I also think it's always really important, because this has come up a lot when we've done all of our evaluation, is to remember that these are tools, that these are not hard, firm guidelines that we have to pick the one with the best score. And we have qualitative elements, we have deliberation, we dive into their pro forma, and we really rely and use these scorecards. But it is not everything. And that part of the purpose of having an in-person commission and not an AI deciding who gets the money is that we get to have the personal input.
And I'll just remind us that last year, we practically ignored the quantitative section because it did not match what we were going after. And so there's no reason we can't ignore this either. But we definitely tried to find a better structure that we didn't need to ignore in order to fulfill our goals.
I'd say ignore might be a strong word, but I do appreciate what you're saying, and you're right. We do have the personal, we're people. We're not going to find some person building 4 luxury condos and be like, oh, this is great. So.
Yeah, I would agree that ignore is a little strong. I would say we weighted more of the qualitative than the quantitative.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Onwards to the qualitative. The qualitative has not changed, but this is your opportunity to make changes or recommendations for changes. Let me scroll down and put those questions on. The only things that we did change are the ones that are in brackets. So we added a little bit of descriptors such as applicant has a proven track record of developing housing or has a proven partner. We don't want to say that if you're a first-time person, you get 0 points on this, especially if you've got like your mentor teaching you how to do it. But now I'm just going to give everybody a chance to read these, and I will slowly scroll through them for anyone online who hasn't found the document on our webpage. But these have all changed, or not changed. They're pretty much the same, and the scoring is the same on them as well. These are of course, the scorecards that each of you, no matter what committee you're on, will be handed, and you'll be looking at these while we are being presented to on the projects that apply. And so these are the questions that everybody here is gonna have to answer as people apply for our funds. So just keep that in mind and make sure you're comfortable with all of it. And if anybody has any questions or comments as you read through them, please just go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there any way of awarding points or taking into consideration how much local resources will be used in these projects?
That gets tough. It gets tough because we try not to pick winners and losers in government. And so we try to evaluate things on the merits of their project. Once you get into, using X amount of local resources and whatnot, it gets hard to enforce, hard to quantify, and can also disincentivize people from trying to come and bring money to invest here. So I appreciate what you're saying. There could be a materials use. We could say, you can get some extra points if you commit to using X amount of local materials, or I don't know. I'm getting out of my lane here. Somebody will have to correct me, but local, X amount of committing to use X amount of local subs, or committing to use a local architect. I mean, those are things that we could put as elements in there.
I just know there's a lot of funding every year that gets shipped out of Tillamook County.
Yeah.
And anything that could promote using local resources keeps that money in our community. Which, yes, the gain of developments is one thing, but it should also be a target to support the area you live in. I mean,
Could there be a question that has something to do with X amount of projects that have been completed within Tillamook County in the past? That gives people like incentivized for repeat things that are done here.
I'm actually gonna call on somebody on the online audience to get their opinion, if you don't mind. Terry, can I ask you a question? Are you still here? I don't think Terry is still here anymore. I was thinking that type of incentive might be more appropriate to be done through someone like the Economic Development Council, and for them to have a program to incentivize any project, if they could have a companion support to ours, like, hey, Housing Fund Awards, who also commit to local incentives, can get this added bonus to it. We're the Housing Commission though, and our number one concern is getting housing built. Like, that is our mandate. Our mission is to do the most needed and attainable solutions possible. And we don't have a mandate for worrying about local development like that, like economic development. But I would totally support trying to find other funds and other people who would add to our awards if they made that local commitment.
Is that I appreciate what Chris is saying.
Yeah.
Is that something maybe in part of their presentation? That we could ask,
I was thinking maybe could we add add a qualitative,
Yeah, totally.
add another 5-point category
is it just,
to just say,
what local resources are you leveraging for this project?
yeah,
Or community, because you kind of get there with community partners,
We do.
organizations, employers.
but could we expand that to
Yeah.
the actual construction process, or what? Yeah, I think we could do it there in a qualitative, just to address that, just kind of incentive, because that would be a way to.
Absolutely. I will find a way to get that into the qualitative section. And it'll be at least one, it might be 2 sections. We might break it out to local materials and local subs or local labor somehow. But I will find a way, and I'll send it to you and get your thoughts on it as soon as we get a good one, unless people have any suggestions.
So the recreational amenities could probably pop into like green space, because those usually go, or don't always go hand in hand, but
Yep.
green space can turn into a dog place or a kid place or whatever.
And then we'll use the local
'Cause that
materials.
pulls up an open category.
Just by talking to the Bayside Commons, I guess you call them the developer, I won't mention the name, advertise for them, but it's a local developer and or construction person. And he came in and he told me that he was able to deliver the project for Bayside Commons, in part because it was local, has been for years, has subcontractors, electricians who trust him that he will pay them on time and not stiff them. I mean, we've talked for some time, so,
And it
then
was
there's
a
a
point
positive.
that Darren Murphy made. He said he was working on this
Yeah.
for years with outside developers. And they just couldn't make the price.
Yeah.
Map up.
Yeah.
And so he had to find somebody local, and he went to Cove Development, and they were able to right away match it because they know everybody here. So it's almost like you don't have to force people to use local. They can't not.
But I agree with Chris, we should incentivize it. It should be there.
So then also looking at the second question, so the project is sponsored by other organizations, you might be able to go take out that or is in support of development of housing and put or utilizes local resources, local subcontractors,
Yeah,
what have you, which will benefit these projects, because if you can find somebody that can replicate this stuff and be able to do it, people want to be able to build housing. They want their employees to be able to be housed.
So right now, what I'm hearing is for question number 2, project is sponsored by other organizations. We are going to include an element of project is committed to using local labor. And for the project includes recreational amenities will be combined with the project provides green space for aesthetics and ecological benefits. And that project will be replaced with a local materials commitment.
So Parker, I think you can combine recreation and then use the language in the second box, copy it to fill that void box now to say project is supported by, and then,
Any local entities. I mean,
yeah.
Right.
It's just about, like I said, if you guys are,
Yeah.
if there's money being pumped out, the more we can encourage for some of that percentage to stay local, that just helps our economics.
Absolutely. We also have that last one that says public, project includes public improvements paid for by the applicant, so that when people bring in money, they also get incentivized for that too.
So what would you want to see as a demonstration? Would it be like the contractor developer saying, I routinely work with X contractor and this electrician, or I have a history?
You can put it in the back end.
Yeah.
When you're finishing up your project, if you can come back to and say, okay, I can show you hard numbers. This amount of money stayed right in your community by me purchasing stuff here, by me using these contractors here.
Yeah.
It could be a way in the back end, because back end money is always important too. If you can come back and say, hey, I kept 10% of total funds in your community, is there a kickback in the end to help me with finalized price, final costs? I mean,
So there's
something to prove that the money stayed in Tillamook County.
in their application though, right? So if we're going to ask
They
them
can
for
forget.
them, so would they like share as part of their application? I'm thinking about the questions online. That we would be like, please tell us how you're using local resources and local contractors and that. So we want them to tell us up front.
Well, all of them are gonna use coastwide or Molar Rock for concrete, because you can't ship it from port. So every project has a percentage of local entities being used, but if you can incentivize them to use more, that's just more money staying in our community.
I agree, and I think that those are questions we should be asking developers when they make their presentations here.
I think, yeah.
Well, and it also helps building here, and you can speak to this better than I can, but when we have somebody that hasn't built on the coast, our rain comes like from upside down and underneath. And I mean, we have houses that people have purchased that weren't constructed correctly, or flashing wasn't done correctly. I mean, even on my own home that I purchased, flashing wasn't done correctly, and I had to a local contractor to come in and take it all down and fix the beam that is no longer there and now is there because flashing wasn't done correctly. So.
I got my house built in 2014 and no GFIs, driving me crazy.
So I mean, there's a benefit to having somebody that understands where rain shows up. Because it's different than.
A lot of Valley places they're production companies. They come in, get it done, get out. But if they're not doing it for our climate, our specific weather. Funniest thing is everybody that moves here, oh, I know what bad weather is. I'm like, give it a couple months. I mean, then they call you, oh, man. I mean, We are in a different, we're in our own little world.
Well, it makes me wonder if it should be in the quantitative section rather than the qualitative section.
It would be hard to quantitate. It would hard, at the time of application, unless they are in stage 5, like they're already building, it would be hard for them to be able to tell us, and it'd be hard for us to be able to believe them. But in the qualitative, they can tell us what their intentions are, what their goals are. We now have 2 categories for it, so it's 20% of the total qualitative score at this point.
And then maybe at the time of, like, we could invite, after we've given the money and the project is completed, maybe have them come back for a follow-up conversation.
I'd like that. I'd like to hear
I
that
mean, just
story.
to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
just to maybe answer those questions.
Well, and it's also planting the seed early on, right? It's saying, hey, think about some local resources and what are some ways that you can utilize.
And I think that we should go and look for other partners in the community who might be willing to say, hey, if anybody takes your money, commits to this, and then demonstrates that that X amount of the project was done locally, we'll kick them back some funds. Because that starts to get out of housing and into economic development is kind of where I'm going on that.
On that part, yeah, but for us to maybe conduct an exit interview.
I think that's a great idea. You know, as we close out contracts, let's invite people for an exit interview. We didn't require that from our initial one, so it'll be an invitation for anything that we've already issued. But going forward, we can put that as a stipulation that once your project completes, you have to come and tell us about it. That seems like a great idea.
Or if they close the contract, doing an exit interview as well to know why they
Why?
closed the contract.
Yeah, like with Danny McGinley, like come and tell us why you can't, that this money isn't enough. Yeah. He returned other money too. Ours wasn't the only funding he was awarded that he returned, so I would like to know more.
And which project was that?
The Verizon building, I mean, the T-Mobile building.
Oh, I probably, yeah.
Yeah,
That's too bad.
it is. He keeps coming back and we're still trying to work that, but it's just not, it might not be the right place for any type of affordable housing is what it comes down to, sadly. Any questions for anyone online on the scorecards, the framework? I think that now I'm going to give everybody some time to come up with last questions or thoughts on this portion of the meeting. So please, anything that we've discussed so far, if anybody has any questions, please ask them. They're very welcome.
I have just a simple, since I'm relatively new, where did the $20,000 limit come from per unit? Was it just the math to four is easy?
I'm actually too new to answer that question. I do not know where we came up with that $20,000 per limit. I'm wondering if the commissioner or Sarah have the institutional knowledge for that.
No, I've seen it on other grants. I think we got it.
There was a formula behind that. I can't recall specifically what it was. Commissioner, do you remember? I know there was a lot.
Yeah, I don't. I know that our first framework was built by, I think, and I know that he did a lot of work looking at what were the state, standards and trying to find something that kind of aligned with what other best practices out there were, rather than reinventing the wheel from the bottom for ourselves. So unfortunately, historically, that's all I've got.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Is the $20,000 per unit something that we should re-examine? I mean,
With the cost of construction.
I was just
going-
gonna say, if this was a number we decided a few years ago, we could adjust it for inflation / material labor cost increase and make an adjustment. We could keep with it this year and plan on next year having a big adjustment. We could remove it entirely and decide that our $400,000 limit is the more important limit.
The formula was based on the average square feet of a unit, material costs, and I think we did that work in late 2020, early 2021. So it also would have been done just before materials really started skyrocketing. I'm thinking specifically about the price of lumber.
Right.
So it may be worth reevaluating that. If you want to open this now, I would suggest maybe that's something we come back and look at next year.
I think one of the things that it makes a real good argument for the $20,000 is that is about SDC fees for most projects. And that's like something that we've specifically called out as something that this fund can help bridge the gap on. So I think we're making a lot of changes this year. I'm totally happy sticking with the 20K. It still covers SBC charges on any unit. Next year, let's revisit and decide if there's a more healthy, appropriate level for these. Does that sound okay with everybody?
We
Well, I
really
think that-
don't have enough money to give that much anyway.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Kristen.
If you
We've
up
never
that,
been
just
able-
lessening the number of them you can go for, so. You're better off keeping it where it's at, if not dropping it a little. To incentivize more units.
Yeah.
If you take that 20 grand, say let's make it 30, well, you just lost 10 projects, so.
Totally. But we might, the flip side is, but we might make more fourplexes on a single family home lot go.
I think maybe the development committee should take a look at that,
Great.
because I think you've got a team of experts there that can help you do that work.
Development committee will keep a close eye on it as we go through this round of applications with the expectation that we have a methodology for changing it next year. Is that okay with everybody? Up or down? Yes. Wonderful.
Parker, got a couple thoughts for you on page 1.
All right.
If it's time to go there. Third bullet point under eligibility, and we're restricting this to 3 or more units. And I wonder if that allowed to be 2 or more units?
Just make sure everybody heard online everywhere. The question is about if 3 units is the appropriate minimum for us to support.
We had a lot of prior conversations. Sometimes, when we originally thought about this it used to be called multifamily housing production fund. And so our definition at the time, the multifamily was 3 or more. And traditionally, 4 or more is multifamily in a lot of, in certain statutes. So that's where that term originally came from. I kind of like to have it 3 or more because I think that matched up with our tax exemption program.
It does, so
It
that
was
was
an
the only
alignment
reason why.
that we intentionally did at the time. And just kind of backing up, kind of the history.
We're encouraging, or wanting to encourage people to have higher density housing. And we have a single family home that has the ability to end up with a second dwelling added to it. Or like looking at having this lot turn into a single family home versus a duplex. If our goal is ultimately increasing the value or the number of houses that are available in our community, that one extra house and that one extra place for somebody to rent actually might pull more people in because that's going to offset somebody's mortgage to be able to do that. And it's going to open it up to more people that might not be able to do these larger scale projects. So it's going to make like me build a house and be like, okay, I think I could live in a duplex and then I've got a place that I can rent. So I don't know.
It does leave out duplexes, and I think there's some real value in having more duplexes, particularly on single family lots, if we can do that.
Would that include an accessory dwelling unit, Dave?
Yeah.
Because that is a dwelling unit.
That's gonna be the kicker with it too. It's ADUs kick in, you're gonna deplete the fund with ADUs and people going after it instead of multifamily housing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Plus, from an investment standpoint, if somebody's looking at doing an ADU, they've already ran the numbers on what it's gonna cost them, what their return is and how long to pay it back. If you start going from 1 house to 3 or 4, your gap gets bigger and your return on investment's longer. So I would say if you're trying to curb the housing, I mean, 3 would be low on my end. I would say 4.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're trying to promote, but the 1 unit people, they're either gonna do it or they're not. Outside funding isn't gonna play into that factor as much as I wanna go from 1. A duplex, yes, those 406 coming in. I've talked to a lot of people that own duplex lots, and I'm like, why would you put a duplex when you can put a fourplex? It's simple return on investment. So
As long as you can meet the parking requirements.
Well, they got a lot lighter lately, so, I mean, like I said, we bought a project and the neighbor came over and goes, why don't you build a house? And I go, for me, it's simple economics, 1 rental or 4. I'm putting in 4 tiny houses. Those are the things, like I said, if you make it too easy and somebody goes, I want to put an ADU on my house and you deplete your fund on people doing ADUs. And then somebody comes in and says, okay, I want to throw 4 fourplexes in. Well, we're out of money, come back and see us next year.
Well, and I also think that financing too, for that, for an ADU could be done through just your local bank or, your home equity or
Home
however,
equity,
yeah.
cover that
So,
most of the time.
right.
So then does it maybe need to be, instead of it being 3, I think what I heard you say, that there's more value on having this be 4 as opposed to.
Well, I don't argue the 3 if that's what the tax credits are at.
Looking at it with the, but just like part of the reason why we dropped it to 3 and didn't follow 4 is looking at available land area, zoning, parking requirements, and actual kind of rudimentary feasibility.
But that was before the high density came into.
Right, but even just with like, if we really want to promote housing, especially in cities, and make it attainable on smaller lots, the 3 units helps us get there with the bundle of this opportunity and the exemption.
Yeah, no,
So that's why they're both 3.
yeah, I appreciate that. And I definitely ask questions to gain understanding of like why and how and where this came from. So thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my counterpoint to this would be if a single ADU can come in and score high enough on our scorecards, do we care? If there's an individual property owner who's like, I will commit to 50 years of affordable housing and like, I'll put it in my backyard. Like, do we really want to say like, no, I'm sorry, this isn't for you?
And I think that was my original thing is that if we've got somebody that's willing to commit to a rental that's going to be, it's not going to be everybody that is going to want their ADU to be used for a lower income rental. Like that's not what they're built for.
And
But
it
if
also
somebody-
hurts your private equity if you're income restricting. People have to enter into a deal with us and a deed restrict, or not quite a deed restriction, but they have to enter into a legally binding agreement with us on it. And that would super hurt their ability to sell their house later on, like they.
But
more
how
or
many
less be-
people can forecast 50 years? I
That's
mean,
right.
how many people in this room can forecast 20 years?
Right.
My life's changed a lot in 20 years.
Totally.
I mean,
I'm
you're
not-
asking for long-term commitments that there's no way to ensure that in the back end.
Right.
You might have somebody sign it, they die in a car wreck in a month.
We got a clawback, but it just doesn't, I'm just saying that if we do this right, if we do our scoring right, the minimum units you can apply for isn't that important. Cause yeah,
But I would just offer to the commission, being part of initially setting this up, like really the goal was to get as many units on the ground as quickly as possible. I think the idea of a separate fund in the future just to support ADUs and duplexes. But like if we're committed to that housing production element of this, I think it needs to stay at 3.
So, Sarah, your thought about getting as many housing units on the ground as possible, it seems like ADUs might play into that.
They will.
And so I guess the question is, what role do we want ADUs to play in solving our housing crisis now? And it seems like it could be an important role.
It is.
We're kind of jumping ahead, because there is we're gonna have a small discussion on ADUs at the legislative committee level. And there's gonna be an ask to the legislatures about ADUs, so hold tight.
and we're pursuing other funds that could potentially support ADUs. I think this is a really good discussion we had, but it sounds like, and in my opinion, ADUs should not be part of this fund for now, but it is something we'll be talking about how we can support going into the future.
Can I just throw one more quick idea, just to your point about housing, your financing options? Maybe part of the ADU effort is holding a workshop or seminar, maybe partnering with the Realtors Association and others to talk about, educate homeowners on how you could go back to your bank potentially and explore those opportunities to build an ADU. Because to your point, I think it's a huge piece of this. but it may be, the education may be more effective than the funding.
And I think that we could even attach a small carrot to something like that and be like, if you come and attend an ADU education fund, we will put a small amount down towards like your getting your ADU going, you know, make people educated and give them some support.
Yeah.
Well, and it's gonna, like, in terms of timeliness, right? Getting an ADU built is probably gonna be quicker than going through and building a 30-some unit thing. So in the time frame that it takes to build 30, one project that's 30-some units, there could be multiple ADUs that are being added that are adding, they both just kind of serve a really important piece with getting housing moving forward and having options for people.
Right.
I went to the ADU tour in Portland a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
And several things stood out to me. Number one, how dense Portland neighborhoods are even before the ADUs. And how now you have to ask in certain desirable neighborhoods, which houses do not have an ADU,
Yeah.
not which houses have them. People are very financially calculated in how they build ADUs. And Portland allows ADUs, you have to make a commitment for 10 years, not renting it as a short-term rental, and you get your SDC charges waived. That is the biggest incentive.
Wow.
Yeah.
That boosted the production of ADUs. If we really want to boost them, that's how to do it. The second thing they introduced was 2 ADUs permitted on a property. So now people are saying it's a no-brainer. You use the same footprint, you build 2 right on top of each other. So there was a couple of them that were like that. The third thing is the condoization. Condoizing a property that has an ADU or an ADU and a duplex or 2 ADUs and a duplex permits the developers to sell each unit separately, which appeals to small developers because they don't want to be landlords. For number one, they want to get their money back and build another project. So like there was one cottage cluster project, a guy bought one house on a piece of land with enough room to build 4 other units. And the intention is to sell them all. They made them a condo series to begin with a management company,
And the
or a management agreement.
State of Oregon has committed to having a more, a less cost-intensive path to condoization by the end of the year, not this year, next year. But they want to make it so that cottage clusters can be easily condoized and sold and have that not be cost prohibitive.
And we're gonna see some of that in the middle housing zoning ordinance updates that we're doing.
Great.
That would be very appealing to small developers.
I'm a big fan of the 2 ADUs on a lot. It also helps support separating a single house into duplex. And in certain cases, they'll actually let you have 3 ADUs on a lot in Portland if it's over 5,000 square feet and you're on a corner. So they really have found some incentive ways to cram that in. I'm going to be doing a time check. We are getting down there and we do have the McCrae's here to talk about their property, their brownfield property. And I want to make sure that we give them time and attention. I think what I'm going to ask to do is to skip ahead real quick and do our report outs. And then we'll use the remaining time for the McCrae's and any questions we have for them. And so we're not up against our need to finish our logistics. Does that sound okay to everybody?
So if you want to open this on Monday, you want to wrap this up today, right?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think all the suggested changes been captured? I've captured all of them, provided that I make all the changes to the framework. Are you all comfortable opening the Housing Production Solutions Fund 2024 on Monday?
I got one more for you. On page 1, under word types and limits.
Thank you.
Third bullet point. For our new members, this concept that the money coming out of the fund is characterized as a grant from a tax point of view, is that it can be a real costly provision. Our understanding is that awardees pay taxes on these grants in the year the grant is awarded, which means it's a significant portion of the grant could go to income taxes. Generally, that for state and federal purposes, that's about 30%. So right away, we lose 30% of the effectiveness of our grant if it's characterized as such and all taxable in 1 year. An alternative would be to give, particularly given the clawback provisions, to treat these as forgivable loans, where each year during the clawback provision, a portion of the loan is forgiven because you've earned that. And that means that only that portion of the award that is forgiven each year is taxable each year. And presumably, a developer would have some additional write-offs as his development came online for depreciation to offset some of that taxation from a forgivable loan. So if there's any way we could make these forgivable loans rather than awards, rather than grants, that would sure be great. The problem is we're having trouble administering that. And our treasurer has told us that that just won't work for her to administer this as a loan. COPAC may be an entity that would administer these for us, whereby it would be characterized as loans. Any updates on that?
I believe I'll let the commissioner have her comments on this.
Thank you. Yeah, no, Dave, I appreciate the call out, and it's something the county is looking for a viable path forward on. We just don't have it today. And without having it today, we have to open these as grants in order to get it open. If we find a viable path forward before they are awarded, or even after they're awarded, before they are given, we'll be happy to entertain that. But people need to know in the application process that at this time, grants are what we are offering. We certainly invite them to partner with, with nonprofits if that works in their world to make those grants non-taxable. They can create a partnership, as some of our developers have done, but we just at this point don't have that path forward. But I promise you, we're working on it.
I'm working hard on it.
Okay.
I think we should put a phrase explaining that in here, because otherwise you're gonna get, well, I heard that last year they were able to get a loan instead of a grant.
No one's gotten a loan. It's all been grants.
Oh,
But I'm happy to say if another option becomes available, the applicant will be made aware.
and maybe a note about if you partner with a 501(c) company, organization.
Sure.
You can.
I think we even entertained having a question. I don't think it made it on the last round of, do you need a nonprofit partner to work with? But I think for various reasons, we shut that down.
Yeah, we really can't recommend a particular nonprofit
Right.
partner. Yeah, and the other thing we can't do is guarantee that a nonprofit partner would limit their tax liability. That's up for them to figure out with their tax professional. So certainly as we're visiting with them, we can say that we are aware of others who've been able to do that work and invite them to explore that with their tax professional. But we just have to be really careful as the county as to what we endorse and yeah. We are a big target for lawsuits, and I'm sorry that that's the truth of our society, but it is. So it means that we have to be fairly risk adverse in the work that we're doing. So thanks.
Commissioner, would you be comfortable if I went and found, like, say, a HUD or a federal government or some sort of state entity that had an explanation of how, like, a nonprofit partnership could help development, or ways to mitigate tax consequences of grants as long as it is a federal source or something? Could I link to that in our framework so people can go and educate themselves?
Yeah, run it by me before we do, if you would, please. So if you find
Absolutely.
something, let's take a look at it in one of our meetings and make sure that we're all comfortable.
Sounds great. I will look for some sort of information to help people educate themselves on this topic.
Perfect. Thank you.
Parker, some of the developer or our folks who have applied talk about something called capital stacks, which I learned mean stacking your money. Is a loan not stackable compared to the grant, even
No,
if it's forgivable?
Both of those are elements of a funding stack.
Okay.
Parker, under eligibility, right before the 3 housing new units, can you put at least?
Sure.
Thank you.
Where's that?
Just saying that a project has to have at least 3 new units instead of just saying.
3
Three.
units, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marlisa. If anybody else finds any other corrections or anything, I will send out the final version of this to you all to have a final look through before it gets published and made public. So you'll have another chance to review this by Monday. It'll go out tomorrow. You'll have the weekend. On Monday, though, this go live.
Right, unless you want, so part of it's we're trying to hit the same timeline we hit last year. So if you want us to stay on schedule, we have to do this by Monday. There's no hard and fast rule that it has to be next week, but we are trying to meet that deadline if you agree that it's important for us to open next week.
And I think the timeline is the last discussion that we need to have about this. So right now, the goal is to open it on Monday and hold it open. Right now, we have until December 1st is my proposed timeline of holding it open. I think that we need to keep it open for at least 1 month. And 2 months was what we left it open for last year. One thing I am proposing as a change, though, is that once we get a full roster of people ready to present, I'd like them to be able to present, and this is just my proposition here, present in November and then have our second round of presentations in December, and we can continue to do the evaluation work instead of stacking it all into December when it's the holidays and there's a lot going on.
It's fast though. I don't know how we can.
I don't like evaluating before
Everyone's
before
presented.
all closed.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be closed before we move on to
I
that.
think so.
Totally.
The other thing I had was December 1st is a Sunday. Are you planning to close it on a Sunday or would it go to that Monday?
December 2nd, we'll close it on the Monday.
We typically, so we close them usually at the end of business day. Because sometimes we do get folks bringing applications into the office as well. So it would be by 4 PM on Monday, December 2nd.
So just to review the timeline in this case, the applications open October 7th. They close on December 2nd. At the December Housing Commission meeting will be the extra long one where we will hear every single presentation. The Finance Committee will need to meet in December to do the financial evaluations. And we would then be final deliberations January.
So Parker, just looking at the timeline, so everybody's clear on that. The grant, so the grant would close Monday, December 2nd at 4 PM. And we would hear presentations on Thursday, December 5th. So do you feel like that gives you enough time?
If there's ones coming in at the very last minute, I will give them the time I have, but I think so. I can't, unless we get multiple applications that need a ton of help from me at the very, very last day.
Could we?
I'm thinking that has played out routinely.
And I managed to do it last time. So with even less of a turnaround, honestly.
On this application, is that a requirement of the applicants to have that day at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Because I don't see it on the framework.
It says that they need to, I will make it, I'll put it into the
But yeah,
timeline.
putting the date on
Yeah,
there
yeah,
to
date
say
of-
date and time, you must be available.
Yeah, date of presentation.
So then would it work better for you to close it November 29th as opposed to going to December 2nd? That's only a day, but it makes it so that you at least Friday,
Have
the
a full day.
29th.
Also, yeah, I like
Have
that.
it closed and then you come in Monday and you've got, like, there's not gonna be anything added at the end of the day on Monday,
I also like the optics of it going from October to November instead of October to December.
right?
Yeah, okay. So November 29th at 4 PM.
29th, 4 PM.
And then according to this timeline,
Back to the, we will remain with
Sorry, that's what I'm thinking about how you're.
meeting. Can we like set a time for the finance committee to meet later in the month, in November, so that we can,
Before it's
closed.
yeah. Can we close it at that time?
Would your housing commission meeting be solely focused on the presentations? Because we've talked about having an extended meeting.
Yeah, but part of the presentation is that they would like, that it's important for the housing commissioners to have the financial information so that they can see the financial evaluation as they make their qualitative, and they may have questions.
Should we have a special housing commission meeting?
That's where
the
I'm
week
going.
after, like the 12th, second week in December?
Oh,
Instead
so
of go ahead and shove out.
So we would have the presentations, finance committee would meet that week and then come back with the full scorecards for everybody to make their determination.
Yeah, and just have a special for the presentation portion.
Like on the
At
12th.
Get something like mid-December.
Right, so the finance committee would have the opportunity.
To get their work done.
Get their work done, and then you have just a special housing commission meeting in December just for the presentations.
Or do you close it November 15th? I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 weeks that it's open.
If we do that, that makes it so the finance could evaluate it in November, we could hear it in December, and that would be our chance. That's our path forward to get this by the end of the year.
It also caps the number of people that can apply, which isn't necessarily a horrible thing in terms of.
So Parker, how is the public engagement and outreach strategy for this, and when is that launching?
So we've been kind of taking a look at what last year was and where people found our production fund. Most of them found it through me. And the ones who didn't found it either through watching the housing commission meeting or publicizing from the previous year. I couldn't find anybody who applied for this because they found it in the paper last year. So I don't know if our funds are best spent advertising this fund in the paper. I'd be willing to do an extra hard social media push. I would also be willing to call every single developer and make a direct communication outreach to every single person who's a developer who I've talked to through the year. That's possible. I can do that.
Ryan has a good question.
Why are we pushing to get these decisions done by the end of December?
Because that was our timeline last year, and last year there was complaints about how long this process went.
Grants take a long time. As someone who works with a lot of grants, there is times where it takes a full quarter. I'm not saying that we should take that, but you don't, when you submit a grant application, you're not gonna get an answer 2 weeks later. There's time, I think if we rush through it too quickly, I'm worried that we'll feel so pushed by that timeline that we won't have enough time to really make a thoughtful decision. So that's why I was just wondering why we're trying to get all of this done in 1 month when we could take a month and a half.
I think that it probably has to do with people work with building when it's not raining. And so having an idea going into the first of the year, if there's gonna be funds available, depending on what their plan is. When it stops raining, that gives people the ability to start doing the things that don't need rain involved in them. And so when you're talking about building, I think that the sooner that we can get that information out to them, the better, especially if it's something that actually has to do with the weather.
Yeah, but I don't entirely see the difference between getting answers out by the end of December and like the middle of January or end of January. Because nothing's really gonna happen the last weeks of December or the first.
But our word isn't necessarily the final word either. It goes another step to the commissioners.
Yeah, so it's not, I mean, I could see us
another
aiming
2 or 3 week delay.
for the commissioners meeting in January.
Did we hear presentations in January this year?
Last time we had presentations in December and January.
Okay.
Forever.
Yeah, and that was it. That was the complaint. It felt like it went on forever. We had our developers wanted to know real estate moves at a different pace than most grants people are applying for.
Yeah.
Development is, until they get that first piece, they can't get to the second. It's a time intensive, long scale. I'm always going to push to be as nimble and quick as possible. Here would be my goal.
We did advertise before it opened last year, if I recall. So that's the other thing is we did let people know the date in advance of when it was opening. So does that matter?
I mean, what would be the backlash of not letting people know beforehand, I guess? Like,
That they
that's-
have more time. It takes time to put a package together for this. If we only give them a month, I don't think that's enough.
Could I say something as somebody who's been working on this for 5 years?
Yeah.
It's like, we're stuck, we're stopped.
Yeah.
So you know, I get it, a month isn't a big deal, but for us, a month is a big deal. And so I think that it's important to, nimble would be the piece. I think there's a lot of folks out there working on projects right now, and they need to be moving, and just, you know, we're talking about the rain. Well, if there's no building going on, maybe we can get surveys done, maybe we can get other things done, right? So it is important, every month counts for us as someone who wants to develop.
And Marley, to give you an example of that, we do have one project out there that is on a real strict timeline that if they don't get to a certain point, then the whole project gets pushed back a year if they can't get things closed in by the time the rain comes. So that's just like one reason to like really be pushing on a timeline. But it's not the most important reason to, and there's a lot of things to be said for having a longer and more engaged process. But this commission also has other work to do too.
What if you shorten the application? Like, what if we opened it even just mid-October so we could get an announcement out? And what if you shortened it instead of 8 weeks? It was 4 or 6 weeks that window was open, because I think people that are pursuing this are paying attention.
So what if we plan to open it next Friday, and I spend all of next week really doing a media blitz to get this out there with the Education and Outreach Committee. And then we would hold it open until basically the Finance Committee meeting in November, so that we can get the evaluations done before they do their presentations. We could hear the presentations in December and go from there.
And when's the finance committee in November usually?
Finance Committee is, I believe, the third Wednesday, but I think that we have nimble enough membership that we could probably move it to where it needs to be. So if we wanted to meet the last Wednesday of November to keep this open as long as possible, I'm pretty sure that we'd be willing to do that. Yeah.
That's Thanksgiving.
That's Thanksgiving.
Oh, that is
So
Thanksgiving.
if you ran it like the 15th through the 15th, I mean,
That's what I was
a
thinking.
30-ish day, whatever that is.
And that gives us 2 weeks to advertise.
Yeah,
That meets all the timelines.
I don't think it hurts to open it earlier
Yeah.
and then be promoting it
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so
after
either.
it's open.
Yes.
So I'm in favor of opening it
Open it.
October 7 and then promoting it and saying it's open now.
Yeah.
just really blocks it.
Go ahead and
Because it
open
just
Monday
allows
and
people
then
that are ready to be
go
ready.
through the 15th.
We'll open Monday. I'll work with the Finance Committee to find the latest date in November that we can all meet, and we will hold it open as long as we can through November, to that meeting. Does that work?
Yeah, just give yourself enough time, because I know you call people, you're looking at their applications, you're asking for additional information to prepare for the finance committee. So
yeah.
I would give it a week in between the finance committee and the closing of the process.
Great.
Because to his credit, he does a tremendous amount of work helping people and getting their information together and finding those gaps so that you get as comprehensive as a package as you possibly can. So give yourself a couple of days.
And something that we haven't reviewed is Dave has put together a fantastic example pro forma to help people with their project applications.
Yeah, well, and also recognizing that sometimes businesses, people just kind of shut down, like after that 15th
Yeah.
is a great time, because people sometimes just kind of shut their phone off for the 15th until the first of the year, that, you know, being able to respond to that. And, you know, the 15th is a really great stopping point, because then
It looked like you put in, we have to, for the overall commission, we need time, those of us not on the finance committee, to see the full report
Right.
of finances, not on the day of the interview.
That's very, yeah, you got
And that's
wanted ahead of
critical
time.
because
Thank you.
That was very disabling last year.
Yeah, I remember that now.
So that's another time bump for you, I'm afraid.
Okay. I'd like to start bringing this discussion to a close and hearing final comments. I think that we've got a really great path forward. I definitely want to make sure the McCrae's come down here to tell us a little bit about their brownfield property, and I want to make sure we give them some time. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to them and we will do our committee report outs right at the end.
Perfect.
All right. If you guys want to come over here, I will bring up your slides and you can present straight from my computer.
Go, Rob.
All right, arrow buttons will move you
Okay, one way or the other.
one way or the other.
Thanks, Parker. And again, I think the key thing that I want to express is just thanks to the Housing Commission, you know, for helping us move forward on the Brownsfield. Also got great support from City Bay City through this process so far. So it's just, you know, I just we greatly appreciate the support. So, for those of you not familiar with us, you know, lack of a better word, McCray Community Project, but also known as Paintbrush Handle Factory in Bay City. Grandma and grandpa up there, although dad was the original entrepreneur. We've been doing something on this site for, you know, almost 70 years. So one of the pictures down there is the building going in 1964. And you know, we've had, I guess it goes the next page on that, is that we've had people from across the street and across the world coming and working in the business that we had. You know, we phased out of that, and now it's like, how do we continue that feeling? How do we move that forward? And you know, I can remember on Saturdays, overtime days, where, you know, the whole crew would come together and it would be like family, but it was the community coming together, and there were people from the neighborhood that didn't actually work there that would come for the soup or whatever, and it was a brilliant place to be as a kid growing up. And the theme that I keep coming back to is the live, work, play. And you know, it's here's a conceptual, you know, it's early phase, you know, what we're looking at. We've got the bright building you can see in the middle is existing infrastructure that we've got. That's the main production site that we have, but surrounding the area, a lot of the buildings were built as we could. They're basically pole barns and very flexible, but not very valuable going forward. And so what we're looking at is trying to create a cohesive community space that combines not just housing, but also innovation. You know, so bringing people back. This, you know, our business started in a garage. I would like to see more people be able to start and expand outside of their garage, and, you know, to have workforce housing, to have middle housing surrounding a community commercial space. So something that can, you know, people can maybe go and get their groceries here, but they can also go someplace else and do some wood shop work that they don't have big enough space to do that with. You know, that this is the vision that we see, and again, it keeps modifying and adapting as reality sets in, but we couldn't have gotten to this stage without the support of the Housing Commission today. So, yeah, you guys have already talked about, you know, what's important here, you know, and the role of the Housing Commission really is about developing housing, but there's other things necessary for community development that we want to be part of as well. So, you know, senior housing, workforce housing, those are things that I've experienced in my lifetime, that I think is just, if we can continue to develop this site, I think a lot of good can come to the community as a whole. So thanks for your support so far. And
yeah, and I think one of the things too that we want to be sure that we're talking about. So we did have the brownfields done, and thank you again. This was because of the Housing Commission. So that came back. We've gone through phase 2. So now we're in pre-development, starting to go through those pieces. So we have engaged people for the geotechnical, we're working on the survey right now, finding someone to do the survey for us. Zoning, the city of Bay City has been wonderful in talking with us because the idea is in Bay City, we have downtown Bay City. But we're over on the south side of Bay City. And so what we would like to be able to do is create space for folks that live on that part of the part of the city and that they can walk there so that the community commercial became a big piece because if we could have a vet in there, or we could have a hair place or a small grocery store, you know, we're. What? Yeah, dog place. But what we want to be able to do is create a space that people can go to and literally walk to. So if it's take their stroller and go, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on. We're talking about a lot of things. And what we'd like to be able to do would be to start with the workforce housing and then bring in the community commercial. There you go. Thank you. That's super helpful.
Just to give everybody an idea of where this site is.
Yeah, how big can you make? You're going the wrong direction.
I'm going, there's Ida Bill. And here I'm gonna start zooming in. Now we're getting into Bay City. And there's Bewley Street. And here we are at their site.
So that gives you an idea. And then we also have a piece of property that's down over that connects to this property that we own personally, which is
North there.
yeah, off to the north or out, actually west. And what we want to do in there, that would be the senior housing cluster. So we see that, you know, that is a big deal. We have some, there's a gal that lives in the neighborhood who I just adore. And she's like, this house is just too big. I want something smaller, but, you know, so maybe like a cottage cluster where they feel like they have their own space, but, you know, they have a community garden or that.
Yep.
So these are all right now ideas moving forward. Number one, we know that the housing or workforce housing is immediate. That's something that needs to happen quicker. But then the community commercial will be right there along Bewley. And it wouldn't, you know, we'll see how big it has to get in order to support it. But on the back side to the left, that is west, and we're up on top of the hill. And so that is a view, and then, well, right now there's trees there, but we let the trees grow, but that's an unobstructed view of the bay. So we could put some condominiums or townhomes or something up there. So we're trying to hit like each one of the housing categories. And the reason for that is that we feel that that will create a better community. So we might have somebody who, you know, is living in the condos, but like what Ralph was saying, the center building is the big question mark right now. We're still kind of trying to figure out what to do with that. Again, with one of our grocery stores going away, maybe, who knows, right?
Can I talk about that center building a little bit?
Sure, sure.
So this building right here was rebuilt in the late 90s, I believe, after a fire. Early 90s. They when they did it, they did giant curved girders or angled girders, which means that there's only less than a dozen center posts, I think.
Two.
There's two in the main space. This also has big bay doors and is an old wood shop facility with tons of power. And why I'm describing all of this is that one of the things that I see when I look at this space is a space that is almost custom made for modular home building. That is in a good location and zoned properly. If we wanted to have a opportunity to train more labor, this site is absolutely custom made for it as well. There's space, there is the facility needed. We're not going to see a lot of these types of properties come up that could move the needle on the fundamental elements of housing here, meaning labor, training, facilities, production facilities. It's a pretty unique space and it has a lot of connection to housing in a lot more ways than just what can be built on this site. It also is one of the opportunities we have to do co-locating of senior care and childcare because of where it is centrally located and how it is zoned. This is a very versatile opportunity that could be a huge demonstration on like housing innovation and can totally move the needle on the overall landscape here. So Dave Madsen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention as a city planner, can you hear me?
Yep.
City
Yes.
planner for Bay City. This is one of our high intensity nodes here in the city. It's the East High Intensity Node. And when we updated our codes a couple years ago, we did not create any opportunities for housing, high intensity, multifamily, um, middle housing, or housing period in the complex. And that was due to some different interpretations by some members of the government at that time. We now have changed our mind, and we're going to be going through our Senate Bill 406 audit and making those changes as McCrae's have pointed out. So we do allow for a much wider flexibility of uses in there. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Can I ask, what caused it to be a brownfield site to begin
Just
with?
that it was a manufacturing site for so long, so if you're gonna put housing on it, you need to do that environmental assessment.
So it was this specific company that caused the,
And the types of things that the brownfield turned up was like, oh, where they parked the trucks, there's some oil and gasoline in the ground and things like that. Nothing huge, no giant pollutants. There's not like a bunch of cadmium or something underneath the ground.
And one thing I learned, with this brownfield assessment is that a site doesn't have to be considered or known contaminated to be considered a brownfield. It could just be a perception. And just the fact that it was an industrial use, previously used as an industrial use, it required some sort of investigation to make sure it was clear. And come to find out, I think all multifamily housing projects have to require some sort of environmental assessment. But yeah, the term brownfield, I got a huge education on that it's not a known, there isn't DEQ coming in and saying, hey, there's environmental concern here on the site. So that was an education for me that I had to learn and digest, because when I think brownfield, it's like, you think these big super fun sites in Portland where they have historical usage. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that was something I learned.
And so Chris Keola in our office has been spearheading the brownfield projects. And we are coming to a close with the grant that we obtained a couple of years ago. It might be helpful, Parker, to see if Chris is available next month if you have space. And he could come back and actually tell the Housing Commission what's all happened with the brownfield work that's been underway.
Absolutely, especially because it looks like there's opportunities to apply for more brownfield
That's right.
funding right now. So
That's
we
what we're kicking around internally.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your project. We'll continue to support you guys in any ways that we can, and we hope to find you some great partners to help realize your vision.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
so you're gonna apply for one of these upcoming grants?
Yes,
I think so.
yes.
Highly likely.
Yes.
It's a nice, like, hopeful, like, it's a good, like, community feel to it that, like, has really good, I don't know, bringing people together. So
That was the main thing that was really important, because at one time there was 100 people working on this facility, and for the most part now it's just he and I mean, people come and go, and it's like, it's really quiet up there.
But you guys have been doing the work of making sure people are taken care of for a long time. I mean, I've been in a lot of like low income houses where your guys' handles are what keep the house warm.
Yes.
Like that, that is a thing that's happened at that site for a long time. And that was like heated people that don't have access to heating for a long time. So this is a really cool like tribute to that. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I and that was something that the family had started, and I thought it was really wonderful, but then we began to have lots of problems like we do with anything, right? And so we had to shut that down and just say, nope, we're not gonna do this any longer. And we got a lot of backlash about it. And yet, it wasn't, and we told, in fact, in our community, the fire chief came and said, well, what about, these little old ladies? Like, come up and get it. I mean, we don't have a problem with that. We were having problems with people coming and getting whole truckloads and leaving dirty diapers and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like, no, we need to shut this down. So anyway, it has been in the community and it is the legacy piece, for Ralph's family, and what they brought to this community here in Tillamook over all these years. So, thank you for saying that, because that was our goal, is to make
It shows.
Thank you.
One of the ways that I'll be helping this project along is we're gonna try to have some sort of open house, symposium event, try to bring in a lot of people who could be interested in this project, talking to community college, YMCA, developers, home builders, anything, and everybody. We're gonna try and bring and introduce and familiarize with them. So we'll be sure to keep that information out there for you all. But I don't want to get too far over our time, and we only have 1 minute left, so I think we'll leave it to Carrie to close us out here.
All right, first off, is there anybody here from outreach that would like to have a quick report out?
Michelle couldn't be here, so I thought I would do it. We put out 2 or 3 articles, 3, I think, articles since we last met, and they're getting quite a bit of play. One on the Bayside Commons, one on ADUs.
Kristen is selling herself short here. She wrote the most successful post we've had on our Facebook page by a huge margin. 14,000 people pressed the like button or had a reaction to it. I mean, pardon me, 5,000 people and 14,000 people saw it, so.
Really?
Nice.
Yep, 4,367 people hit some sort of reaction button to that post.
Oh, good.
Was that the basement?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
And I think people, like younger people, older people, the demographics that I'm seeing sharing that is really exciting because it's really reaching across our community.
yeah.
This is awesome.
It definitely made a packed a punch. And it's still distressing that a lot of people are saying that's not affordable housing, I can't afford it, and that's using the federal requirements. So we need to do a little more effort to get people to comprehend where those numbers come from. And we attended the Bayside Commons opening, the 3 of us here, Mark and our Lisa, and I guess we're gonna be jumping into the announcements about the grant, so that'll be something we'll do next.
Dave, do you have anything on the finance committee?
Our primary focus has been on the framework.
All right.
That's all we've got right now.
Well, I'm just gonna quickly touch on the legislative since I kind of teased you guys with it. We are currently kind of fielding out right now. That's gonna go to our state representatives, our county commissioners, and the House Committee on Housing and the Senate Committee on Housing Development. And we're gonna be asking, once we have that draft letter finalized, we'll be sending a commission to get your seal, not necessarily signature or seal of approval. I'll sign it as chair. But just want you guys to read it and hopefully incur the line. I guess, agree to the statements that we are making. Most of it came, a lot of it's just snippets from a prior letter we sent out in the prior legislative session. But we are kind of at the very end, putting out some kind of concepts, legislative concepts. And one is a $2 million incentive program for ADU development, with those monies going specifically to a rebate program to cover 50% of the system development charges to developers. That was something we kind of had a discussion about, that we wanted to create a pot of money, so we thought why not ask?
Yeah.
We're being very optimistic in that, but it basically with a goal of maybe 200 ADUs in the ground here in the county. And then the other 4 were a significant allocation of monies to infrastructure financing for municipal governments and special districts to support housing needs and growth, especially in rural areas. So a fairly generic statement there. Enhance cooperation in getting allocated pre-development loans out the door. This is more specific to that conversation that we had last month. The frustration about getting those loans out. So I was hoping Parker might add a little bit more details in that.
I will add some details.
And then just large investments in pre-development loans for workforce housing and long-term financial backing. Because that's something that we are constantly struggling with.
Yeah.
Is to get some sort of conduit funding that, because a lot of the ones that were done previously are really convoluted and tied to a lot of property tax backing. So we'd like to just see more of opportunities for middle income housing. So that's kind of our generics, and the rest was kind of background saying here's the needs from our last housing analysis. So we will be getting that finalized and sent out to you. So then we will take that and get that out to our representatives so they kind of have a reintroduction to who we are and what we do. And then hopefully in the future during this legislative session, we can go forward and have some recognition out there. So when we do take a side in certain legislation or back or certain legislative actions, they'll kind of acknowledge what our voices bring to the table. So I just wanted to get that out there. And we are going to go back to monthly meetings on the legislative committee. So we are going to be meeting, let's say it's the third Wednesday of every month.
I believe so.
So we have a new enthusiastic member, at our ex officio member from the city of Rockaway, a city councilor. So we're growing slightly. So we like it. And then development committee, Parker.
Yeah, Jackie Reiser has been elected chair of the development committee. She's under the weather and not here today. And then the development committee is going to, I haven't told you guys this, come and take it too. And so when we get that all set up, we will send out an invitation for some of you, but not a quorum level of you, to join for that meeting. And otherwise, that committee has really impressed me as we've really gathered some concerned experts, and it's a lot of developers who are giving a lot of great feedback to the work that we're doing. So I'm very grateful for all their work.
And last but not least, is there any public comment? You're not the only public member here. Anybody online? All right, well, it's 11:07, so we're gonna close our meeting and we'll see you next month.
Thank you all so much.